Okay. Let me just point out something else about the law. And again, we'll probably be back in Galatians. We're probably going to have a lot of visits to Galatians in the next few hours. Turn to Hebrews chapter 9, verses 9 and 10. Talking about the tabernacle of Moses and the different compartments. The writer of Hebrews says in chapter 9, verse 9 and 10, that's the tabernacle and its ordinances, was symbolic for the present time in which both gifts and sacrifices are offered, which cannot make him who performed the service perfect in regard to the conscience. He's talking about the gifts and sacrifices and regulations and ordinances of the law. And then he says in verse 10, which were concerned only with foods and drinks, various washings, and fleshly ordinances imposed until the time of Reformation. And what he's saying is, none of those things change a person inside. They're all carnal. The regulations of the law about what you might eat, the clothes you might wear. If you were in the priesthood, you had to have a perfectly whole body. You could not have one eye blind or a crooked nose or a bent finger. They're all carnal regulations. They concern the flesh. And that's the nature of the law. So when you go under legalism, you go back into the flesh. You become carnal. I don't in any way want to be cynical, but at the same time, let me point out to you that probably the people who fight most in the Christian church are the legalists. When you get into a battle between legalists, you better walk out, because there'll be corpses. That's carnality. It's religious carnality. Sounds very good. People are very proud of it. But it is not the Holy Spirit. It's not the life of faith. It is not grace. They are deceived. They're very sincere, many of them, but sincerely wrong. How are they deceived? Who deceived them? Satan. By what? By witchcraft. Okay. Now, we're going to make a little study of the nature of witchcraft. And please note, I'm not primarily talking about old ladies running around on broomsticks. Or even about Halloween, although that is a celebration of witchcraft, which should have no place whatever in the church. But let me say, I'm talking about something that affects the life of the Christian church. It's very much in the church. Now, there are three main English words that we use for this whole area: witchcraft, divination, and sorcery. And in various Bible translations, they tend to be used interchangeably. That's where one translation says witchcraft, another says divination, another says sorcery. I don't want to get involved in the details of translations. I want to point out the essential nature of each and then give you the overall picture. Witchcraft is really a form of satanic power. It's a way, by the use of Satan's power, of imposing your will and enforcing things on people which they wouldn't want. And it operates maybe mainly by curses and spells. I mean, there are many other types or words that could be used. Divination is essentially fortune-telling, predicting the future. It also includes telling people where to find lost objects and where the man is who may have been murdered, and all that. Sorcery operates through things. The essence of sorcery is finding things that you can use to release the power of Satan, like charms, amulets, potions, things to drink, drugs, the whole modern drug culture is sorcery. And one more thing, music. Now, if you've been in Africa for any length of time, you've seen all that with the witch doctors. It's not new. It's gone by way of South America, I understand, and come to the United States and then the rest of the, quote, civilized world. But there's nothing new about that. It's as old as witch doctors. The essence of the witch doctor's craft is to know what potion to give somebody to make somebody else love them. To make a man fall in love with a woman, or a woman fall in love with a man. Or how to get your enemy out of the way by poisoning his food surreptitiously. And don't tell me it isn't real. I just don't want you to imagine that. Listen, I'll tell you a story. I don't like to advertise Satan, but this was told me firsthand by a missionary in Zambia. He said there were two elders in an African church. And the one elder was jealous of the other. And he couldn't get on with him. So he went to the witch doctor and said, I want you to put a hex. You know what a hex is, don't you? Put a spell on. The word hex is the Scandinavian word for witch, that's why I mean. To put a spell on this other elder. So the witch doctor said to him, well, bring me a mirror. And he brought him a mirror. And then he went out in the bush, got some soil and other things together, smeared the mirror, covered it over. Then he said to the elder, now wipe the mirror clean. And when he did, to his astonishment, the mirror showed the picture of the man that he'd asked the witch doctor to deal with. So he said, now I'm going to break the mirror. Broke it in two, and the other elder died. Now that is a true story that happened within the last decade. See, don't go to places like Africa and say that Satan has no power, because they laugh at you. They know full well he has power. They've cultivated his power for centuries. What you have to tell them is there's somebody who has more power than Satan. That's the message that they need. Well, that I would call witchcraft. Now, to come back to where we were, that's by curses and spells. Fortune-telling is another way that Satan drags people into his net. There's a tremendous desire to know the future in most people. It absolutely permeates contemporary Israeli society because of the tensions they live under. And the occult flourishes in contemporary Israel. All right, now, we're not going to give a study in all that, but I just want to say that for purposes of communication, we'll use witchcraft when we're talking about this whole area of the satanic occult. If you want one contemporary word, that's it. The occult is all of that. Now, I want to explain to you how witchcraft operates. I don't like to spend time dealing with Satan's activities, but it is absolutely vitally important that we know what we're dealing with. God has led me into this truth stage by stage. I find that often when I'm dealing with problems, it's like dealing with a tree that you want to cut down. But you start with the twigs, and then you get to the smaller branches, and then you get to the main boughs, and then you get to the trunk, and after that there's only one more thing to get to, and that's the roots. That's right. When you've got the roots, you've dealt with the tree. So it was when God thrust me into the ministry of deliverance from evil spirits. I began by getting people delivered from things like addiction to nicotine, things like that. But I came to see that's really just the small branches. Let me say this about an addiction. I think without exception, an addiction is a branch that grows on a frustration. So you don't solve the person's problem if you merely deal with the addiction. To take an example, you've got two wives, each of whom has a husband who runs around with other women, spends more than he earns, and gives no respect to his wife. So the first woman is an Episcopalian. She's got to find an outlet for her frustration, so she goes to the cocktail cabinet and she becomes an alcoholic. But the second wife is Church of God. Now, for her to get to a cocktail cabinet would be a Sabbath day's journey. Where does she go? To the refrigerator, that's right. And what does she dip into? Ice cream. And she becomes a foodaholic. Just as much enslaved by ice cream and things like that as the other woman is by alcohol. Now, you're not going to solve the problems of either of those women properly if you deal merely with their addiction. What you've got to deal with is the problem of the husband. You've got to teach them to forgive their husband, to lay down bitterness and resentment, because that frustration is the branch that supports the addiction. How many people do you know who gave up smoking and started overeating? Isn't that true? What happened? They just switched addictions, but they never dealt with the basic frustration. So, what I'm trying to do now, I've groped my way through the branches. I've gone down to the trunk, and I can tell you what the root is. The root is rebellion. It always is. That's the root of all human problems, is rebellion against God. And you've never really solved a person's problems unless you've dealt with rebellion. Now, I want to turn to 1 Samuel chapter 15 and verse 23. This is a statement made by the prophet Samuel to King Saul. King Saul had been sent on an errand, a mission by God to destroy the Amalekites. He disobeyed. He only destroyed some of them. He kept the rest. And Samuel was sent again to tell him that God had withdrawn his favor from him because of his disobedience. We don't want to go into the background, but we just want to, we better read verse 22 and verse 23 of 1 Samuel 15. Then Samuel said, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams." Now here's the statement. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Some of you have divination, some of you may have sorcery. And stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he also has rejected you from being king. Now, Samuel makes two statements there. Rebellion is like the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is like idolatry. I don't want to deal with stubbornness, but let me just explain the difference between rebellion and stubbornness. Rebellion says, I won't do it. Stubbornness says, I'll do it my way. Personally, I'd rather deal with rebellion, because they don't even pretend they're going to do what they were told. Now, the Bible says stubbornness is idolatry. You know what a stubborn person does? He makes idols of his own opinions. That's right. And that's idolatry. However, we're going to deal with the other statement. Rebellion is like the sin of witchcraft. Rebellion and witchcraft are twins. And I've discovered in the ministry of deliverance, wherever you find one, you'd better look for the other, because they're seldom separated. Now, witchcraft in the New Testament is described in two different ways. First of all, it's described as a work of the flesh, and secondly, it's described as an evil spiritual power. We've already seen it described as an evil spiritual power in Galatians 3:1. They were bewitched. An evil spiritual power had come upon them and blinded them to the cross. But in Galatians 5, verse 19 and 20, we read, the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, licentiousness, idolatry, sorcery, and so on. Notice, sorcery, and I'm going to say witchcraft, is also a work of the flesh. It's an aspect of the behavior of unregenerate, fallen humanity. That's a work of the flesh. Now, in what way is it a work of the flesh? I believe God has shown me the key to understanding this. Rebellion is the rejection of God's legitimate authority. That's the essence of rebellion. However, if you're going to keep things going at all and get anything done, you have to have some kind of rule, some kind of ruler. But the ruler who's not ruling under the authority of God is an illegitimate ruler. And he uses illegitimate power to enforce his rule. What is the illegitimate power he uses? Witchcraft. You understand? That's why rebellion and witchcraft are twins. Let me say that again because I see some of you are a little confused. The essence of rebellion, first of all, is the rejection of the righteous, legitimate government of God in your own life or wherever. Then, in order to keep things going, there has to be some kind of rule, some kind of order, some kind of government. But if it's not submitted to the righteous government of God, it's an evil government. It's an illegitimate government. But it needs something to enforce it. And the power that illegitimate government uses to enforce it is witchcraft. Have you got that? Now, let's take a few examples. In essence, witchcraft as a work of the flesh is something to which any one of us could be exposed. Do you understand that? I'm not talking about something demonic. I'm just talking about something as in the same category as losing your temper, or entertaining lustful thoughts, or committing immorality, or whatever it may be. It's a work of the flesh. Now, keep your finger in Galatians. We're going to be back there. And turn for a moment to Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. Now, this is God's original plan for man and woman as He created them. Then God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea," etc. Notice, subdue and have dominion. That was part of man's destiny to be a ruler. God's purpose for him was that he would rule under the authority of God as God's vice-regent, as God's representative authority on the situation. But man rebelled against God's authority, rejected God's government, became a rebel, but that rebel still has in him the implanted desire to subdue and to exercise dominion. But now, if he does it in the fleshly nature, it's an expression of witchcraft. It's an illegitimate way of getting people to do what you want in simple language. And it's amazingly common. The whole of contemporary society is filled with it. Once you've begun to recognize it, it's frightening. Let me give you a few examples. Well, first of all, let me give you the 3 key words that I have found. Manipulate, intimidate, and dominate. And wherever you run into any of those 3 things, behind them is the devil. God never manipulates, He never intimidates, and He never dominates. So as soon as you encounter those 3 things, back off, whether it's in yourself or in others. Now we'll look at a few different areas in which this operates. Let's take family relationships first. Now, I realize some of the things I say could be challenged by certain contemporary social movements, but I'm just based on the Bible. It is biblical for parents to have authority over their children. I doubt whether there's anybody here that would question it. There are a lot of people in some places that do today. So, the parent should govern the child, not the child the parent. If the child governs the parent, that's illegitimate. And to govern his parent, the child will use illegitimate means, which means witchcraft. Okay? Little children can be experts at manipulation. All right. Little Johnny doesn't get what he wants from his daddy, so he goes to his mummy.
circumvents Daddy, says, Mummy, I would like, gets her to promise, and then goes to Daddy and says, Daddy, Mummy promised. What's that? Manipulation, isn't it? What's making him do it? The desire to get his way. See, whenever I want to get my way, I'm exposed to satanic influence. Or little Johnny doesn't get his way in something else, so he throws himself on the floor, kicks his legs in the air and screams. Well, there's a neighbor lady visiting, and Mother's terribly embarrassed to have little Johnny on the floor kicking and screaming, so she gives him what he wants. He was smart enough to know that if he did it in front of one of the neighbors, he'd get his way. What's that? Manipulation. That's right. And, dear parents, if you let your children get away with that, they'll become master manipulators. And they'll go through life manipulating. And when they get married, they'll still be manipulating. And they'll probably spoil their marriage. Then there's the mother. Now, I want to say, incidentally, witchcraft is a female word. That's an accident. There is a male word, it's wizard, but nobody ever uses it. But I want to make it very clear that witchcraft is not confined to women. I hope I make that clear. It's much more dangerous when it's in men, actually. Then it's really dangerous. So anyhow, let's take the mother and the wife. There's a book was published in the 1960s by a Jewish writer entitled How to Be a Jewish Mother. And the introduction was written by his mother, who said, I haven't read this book, but I know it's good because my son wrote it. But one of the chapters in the book is how to get your son to play the violin in public using no other motivation but guilt. You know, your father and I have paid all that money for your lessons, and here's Aunt, and she's just here for one day. What's that? Manipulation. That's right. There are, I would say, millions of women in the United States today who know other way to get what they want. They've grown up with that. That's what their mothers did. That's what they got, what they wanted from their fathers. They don't know there's any other way to get things. It's a work of the flesh. Now, don't imagine for a moment that it's confined to women. Men tend to manipulate other ways. For instance, one of the ways that a father manipulates his children is by being intensely critical and getting his son, let's say, to the point where he just can't please Daddy no matter what he does. It suits the father's ego, but it wrecks the son's character. I've had to pick up some of the pieces from that mess. A father may want to get his way. He'll throw a fit of rage. He'll stamp and shout and maybe throw the crockery around. In the end, people give way to him because they just can't stand the pressure any longer. What's that? Manipulation, witchcraft, intimidation, you could say that. There's these relationships in many areas. Teachers and pupils. Teachers are often in danger of exercising a wrong kind of influence over their pupils. Teachers can ridicule pupils or overcorrect and ruin a personality. You see, the problem with witchcraft is it destroys human personality the way God intended it to be. Teachers can pronounce curses on children. There's a little nervous girl of 6 who doesn't make any headway with her reading. You'll never learn to read. You're just not smart. That can go through life on a person. What's that? It's a curse. It's witchcraft. You take the pastor in his congregation. You see, I believe a pastor has authority in some respects. What if a man says to one of his members, if you ever leave this church, you'll never succeed. You'll miss God for the rest of your life. Have you ever heard that? And I don't have any particular person in mind, but it's very common. What is it? It's witchcraft. That's right. There's the other way. If this is a Pentecostal church, there's 2 spiritual ladies in the church. The pastor is young, somewhat timid and inexperienced. And every time he starts to do anything that they don't approve of, one of them gets a message in tongues and the other gets an interpretation that tells him not to do it. What's that? Witchcraft. That's right. Some Pentecostal churches are run by witchcraft. Okay? Well, we're going to have to stop at this point. We'll continue with this interesting subject in our next session.